Okay, everybody did come back. Welcome. So we've reached a point now, I think an exciting point. We've kind of covered the basic material that I intended to cover from when we came at first. We said that we defined yoga as a practice which empowers one to overcome the obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing their own true nature. And so we spoke about the nature of the self, we spoke about the mind, and we spoke about the four paths that are the practices of yoga, culminating in bhakti yoga. In the last few classes, we've talked about the 9 limbs or angas, or you could say expressions of bhakti yoga. Now, where I want to go now is that pretty much everything that we discussed up until this point, mostly everything, we could call it what I call it conventional Vedanta, kind of topics that all Vedantins accept. Maybe the little part at Bhakti at the end, in those paths, it differentiated some different interpretations of Bhakti. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about that there's confidential Vedanta, there's confidential Shastras, there's confidential teachings of his that he wants to share with Arjuna. And now I want to go into those teachings, and really for the rest of our 10 or so days that we have left. But it all starts, if we're going to understand what is Vedanta, we need to understand who it comes from. And so today I want to speak at length about the great sage Vyasadeva, who he was or who he is, and what his gift was to this world, what he shared, his literary gift to the world. Excuse me, his literary gift to the world. And when we can understand who he is and what his mission was and what exactly he was setting out to do, and also another very crucial key to understanding all of this stuff is he had written all these texts and then he felt a sense of disappointment or a sense of lacking. And why did he feel something was wrong after he had written all these texts? And then what he does to kind of clarify. That we're not going to talk about today, but it'll become super important in the coming days about how to make sense of all of this. Are you ready to hear about Srila Vyasadeva? Yes, okay, wonderful. This is something, it seems to me bizarre that everyone doesn't learn about him and who he was right from the very beginning, because everything that we study is coming through him. And I have this is a saying within the realms of Vedanta, that from the infinite sky of the mind of the great sage Vyasadeva, all other sages have barred their knowledge, just as people might pick up items discarded from another's home. You know, I live in New York City, and on I think it's Thursday, the sanitation department picks up big things, if you want to throw out. Yeah, and in New York, it's everybody's got small apartments, so people, they throw out nice stuff sometimes, big thing, couch, a desk, and you can go out and it's all out there, and people may go out and pick something, right? This saying is saying that everything that every other sage from this tradition has, they've taken it from Vyas, right? He's given the body of knowledge, and they draw from it. There's Vyasadeva's literature, which are considered, most authoritative. And then there are different schools of thought or different interpretations of his teachings that come down in many different branches. And even other whole schools of philosophy that are heavily drawing from what he provided first. Patanjali's yoga is such a philosophy, right? It's in one sense it's its own school of thought, but I don't know how, percentages might be a little difficult to calculate, but 90% or more can all be found in Vyasadeva's teachings. So he's so important. Here's a painting of him sitting by the Saraswati River, way up in the Himalayas. He lived in a place called Badarika Ashram. So nowadays it's called Badrinath. And if you want to go very high into these mountains, you can go there. Has anyone been there, Badrinath, before? You've been, huh? You've been. You've been. Oh my goodness. I've never been. Raghunath is going there next fall. It's a little sketchy getting up there. And the roads are these cliffs, that buses do occasionally go over. It's like it's a bit challenging to get up there.
No, the roads are super fine.
Oh, really?
Super fine.
Are you sure? Is you're telling me these roads are super fine? Is that like when Indian people tell me that this dish will not be spicy at all?
I'm telling you, with coconut milk.
Okay.
Absolutely fine.
Okay. Yes, let's get the microphone over to Amiti.
Oh, just because my husband's trying to go there in a couple of days, but my
wow.
understanding is the road is technically closed
Okay.
because it's a military access as well until April, but he's going with a friend who might be able to get things
I
done.
see.
So that's their goal. They're going there in a
Okay.
couple of days.
Very good. So, I thought today I might read from the book that I'm working on because I've just kind of compiled my thoughts here. Is that okay? It's unedited. It's a little rough. But let me just first put him in a bit of a historical perspective in the way that the tradition understands it. The Vedic knowledge that's shared in this world, the sages say that this is an eternal body of knowledge. Originally, it's just called the Veda, which means the knowledge. It's kind of a very generic term to speak about the wisdom of this world. They're saying that this world isn't some random combination of matter that has just exploded. It's just some gaseous, explosion within space that gradually transformed and evolved into the world as we see it now by chance. The yogis are saying, no, this is a world that's carefully designed by an Ishvara, by a controller, who creates and designs things for a purpose. And just like any well-designed apparatus, it generally comes with some kind of manual, how to use it, right? This video screen here, or this microphone, or whatever it is, they generally come with a manual. How do you use this? What is it meant for, and exactly how do you use it? The Veda is the manual for the universe. To understand the universe, understand our place in it, and ultimately understand how to transcend it. And so that it's said that body of knowledge, it's called, and this is an important word, aparusheya. Aparusheya means aparusheya, not like man-made, right? No fallible human being created this at any time. This sometimes it's described as the breathing of God, right? It's always there. In a sense, it emanates from God, and as long as God has been there, this has been there. So it's always been there, and that this body of knowledge is floating right through space. It's always accessible, right? You just need to know how to access it. And I always share this, is that idea, it can sound, for a skeptic, it could be like, sure, there's a body of knowledge floating through the air. And if we would have said this 100 years ago, or what to speak of 200 years ago, I could imagine someone would have a better grounds to be skeptical. But nowadays, we see that bodies of knowledge are floating in the air. Do we not see that? Right in the room that we're in here right now, every single, what do they call it, bit, right? Every little speck of data, of information that's on YouTube is in this room right now. We can't see it, but it's there. And someone who has the proper technology, which is really something that we're all carrying around in our pocket now, they can tap into that and download all that information. It's just floating through the sky, right? So the yogis, before these machines were invented, they knew there's knowledge floating through the sky. There's an eternal body of knowledge floating through the sky. And it wasn't exactly with this kind of equipment, but it was with this inner equipment that the yogi could tap into it, access that knowledge, download it, and share it. So certain sages, certain yogis had that ability to pick up that vibration and then share it. And the way that they would share it was orally, right? This was before we think that the best way to preserve some knowledge is to get it down on paper. But actually, the yogi said better way is oral way, right? And I don't want to go too into this, but if you really go into it, it begins to make sense. They would memorize, like yoga used to be that you would go to the home of your guru, like when you're 8 years old, early in the morning, you go to the home of the guru. As the sun's rising, you're chanting mantras together, right? And that's all of this Vedic wisdom. There's just recently in South India, some young man that received some special award because he had memorized huge amounts of the Vedic literature, right? But beyond what people think is humanly possible. But no, it is possible. Particularly in earlier ages, it was said that it was easy for people to hear this information and memorize it. And they would also, by chanting it together, you're 8 years old and you chant these things every morning, it just all goes into the memory bank. And they would chant it in a group. So if any person mispronounced even one syllable, the rest of the group was right there to correct it. And this way it was like a self-correcting mechanism. And they also had all kind of mnemonic devices, like the intonation of how they would chant it, or even different like bodily movements as they would chant, would help them memorize this. And this way, they had a way of preserving this knowledge. It was a very serious thing. It was like, this is the basis of Vedic culture, is the memorization and the handing down unchanged of this body of knowledge. Really serious thing. But a certain point in history comes, the cusp, or the changing of the yugas. 5,000 years ago, the time change, there are 4 different yugas, 4 different time periods that these Vedic texts teach us about on Earth. And they kind of go like from a very beautiful time to not quite as much to still less to like we're in trouble. And believe it or not, we're in that darker age right now called the Kali Yuga, where it's said that people live short lives, people have short memories, people are generally unlucky and misguided, in conflict with one another, and it's most essentially their minds are always disturbed. That's us. They're talking about us. And as that age approached, it became important to preserve this knowledge somehow. So the sage Vyasadeva was entrusted to download this information, which is an incredibly vast body of knowledge, and find a way to categorize it, divide it, you can say edit it, in a practical way that it can be understood, organize it, and then get it down in written form so that it can be preserved in the Kali Yuga where our memories are short. We're not so good at that. So he had a very special mission. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the word Vyasa literally means the editor. It's not the person's name. It's more just like his title. His real name is Krishna Dvaipayana, or he's called Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa. Krishna Dvaipayana, the editor. Sometimes he's called Vyasa. Sometimes he's called Veda Vyasa, or we can call him Vyasadeva. All right. And he looked something like this, right? He had that classic sage, appearance. Okay. How did he divide this work? How did he organize it? I'm going to throw a lot of information at you right now. And we're going to take our time with it. We're going to spend actually a lot of time on this. We're going to go into these different literatures and what each one shares. And we're also, and this is really important, and this is also another key, that we're going to show how these texts move in a progression, how they unfold, and how they go deeper and deeper into the deepest spiritual truths. Okay? Sound good? Okay. So the very first thing that Vyasadeva does is he compiles a set of 4 books called the Vedas, right? This is his first contribution. Sometimes we'll we'll refer to all of this literature as the Vedic literature because it's all being derived from the Veda. But just for now, except that he wrote first 4 texts, or I shouldn't even say he wrote, but he compiled them, he downloaded them and organized them and edited them, called the Vedas. And those 4 Vedas are called the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Samaveda, and the Atharva Veda. Okay, now it's worth knowing that. A good yogi should know this, but let's not get too caught up in all of these details right now. But the next important detail is each one of these books follows a similar format. Each one of them is divided into 4 subdivisions. And those subdivisions are called the Samhitas, which are collections of hymns and mantras. Aranyakas, which are covering rituals and ceremonies and sacrifices. Brahmanas, which are interpretations of ritual. And all of that, those first 3 sections, we're going to put that in one category. We'll do that soon, but that's called the Karma Kanda. It's really about performing rituals in this world for the purpose of receiving material benefits in life. Learning how through your ritual, through your hymns, through your good behavior, through your dharmic activity, one can receive material boons in this life. One can live a prosperous and healthy and harmonious life, harmonious with nature, harmonious with each other, harmonious with the gods. It's, in one sense, a very beautiful thing. But at the end of each of these 4 books, there's a collection of, there's this 4th subdivision called the Upanishads. Now, altogether, there are 108 Upanishads. These are books of their own, very deep philosophical books. And there's a collection of Upanishads that come at the end of each of the 4 Vedas. The Rig Veda has its Upanishads. The Yajur Veda has its Upanishads. The Samaveda, the Atharva Veda, they all have a collection of Upanishads that come at the end. Is it becoming clear in your minds? Right? 4 Vedas, each has 4 divisions. Each has Upanishads that come at the end, right? And this is significant because the Upanishads are part of the 4 Vedas, but their message is very different from the other subdivisions, the Samhitas, the Aranyakas, and the Brahmanas. They have a very different mood, a very different flavor, a very different message. And because it's so different, people commonly speak of the Upanishads in contrast to the Vedas. They'll say there's the Vedas, and then there's the Upanishads, right? The Upanishads are part of the Vedas, but because they have such a different message than the rest of it, they're often spoken about in contrast. Everybody with me? Questions about that before we go forward? Yes, we'll get a microphone back to you. One moment. Just please hold one moment.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. I would like to know why does the Upanishad, they speak in contrast from the Vedas? Like why they are part of the Vedas but still in contrast?
Okay, and that's a good question. And honestly, I can only give you my thoughts on why that might be. And I'd imagine different speakers would share their thoughts that might be similar or a little different. But this is a real essential thing, and I'll read some things that I've written about this probably tomorrow or the next day or something like that. But the way that we think, the way the Western mind thinks is somewhat different than the way the Eastern mind thinks. And I believe that has to do with because our ways of thought are based on our spiritual texts that go way, way back historically. So Western people have a way of thinking that's developed through the Abrahamic texts, through the Bible, through the Quran, and so on, where teachings are given in such a way where it's like, this is right, this is wrong. Get on the right side immediately, or you'll go to hell forever. It's kind of like simplified, and everybody's told do the same thing. And the Eastern text, like this Vedic literature, it's speaking in a different way. It's speaking to wherever you're at if you're on this first step of the ladder, we're going to tell you all about the second step of the ladder and how absolutely great the second step is. And if you read that, you might think the second step is the ultimate, right? But then there's going to be another text that's saying, you know what, the second step is not so special. There's something more than that, the third step, you know, and then it's going to speak on that third step and glorify it like crazy. And that creates a confusion, like, what is the highest step? Does it all moving in a certain direction? But so the Samhitas, the Aranyakas, the Brahmanas, they're giving you really good, a step up from pure reckless materialism, saying, if you want the material things of this world, there's a better way to do it. Do it in harmony with the knowledge. Do it in harmony with the devas, the gods and the goddesses. Do it in harmony with dharma that comes down through these texts, and you'll live a much better materialistic life. And so you're going to get, if you're studying these books, you're going to get that message very strong, and then connected to that, it's going to say, hey, there's something more. There's higher teachings, and those are in the Upanishads. So, for instance, I quoted a verse the other day, which is from the Rig Veda. What was that? Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Sada Pasyanti Surya Divyachakshar Atatam Tad Viprasho Vipanyavo Jarivangsha Samindate Vishnu Yat Paramam Padam. So this verse, let's say a married couple is, they just bought a new house, right? And so now that's a significant step in life. And so they want to take that step in life. We're going to move into this house. We want this to be auspicious. We want this to be in harmony with all the gods and goddesses. We want to show them our appreciation. We want them to bless our life within this house, that it'll be prosperous, that it'll be peaceful, that it'll be pleasant. And so what we'll do is we'll turn to the knowledge. We'll turn to the Vedas. Now, we don't really study those books. Who studies those books? The priests. Right? And so we'll get the Vedic priests who study these books. They're going to come to our home. They're going to light a fire and do this ritual. They're going to chant mantras. And those mantras will be hymns that glorify the gods and the goddesses that are going to bless us to have a prosperous and happy life in this house. That is, by definition, materialistic. We want the material things of this world. And the hymns will be expressing that and requesting that. But blended into those hymns are going to be verses like the one I just quoted, which point to something higher. Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Sada Pasyanti. Some great sages, the Suryas, the wise people, they're seeing that there's something higher. The Paramam Padam, the highest step. Vishnu Paramam Padam, the realm of Vishnu, right? And these learned, qualified, enlightened sages, samindate, they're illuminating the vision of that higher world, so that the rest of us materialistic people, concerned with our home and our prosperity, so that we can see it. And so, but my understanding would be that by putting these texts at the end, it's like saying, hey, you're going to be doing these rituals, you're going to be receiving material boons, and you'll be blessed by it, and you will find happiness in life, but you're also going to find an emptiness too. And these books speak to that emptiness, that when you feel that emptiness, then you can go deeper. So then the Upanishads are there. Is that okay? Yes, in the back.
Where does the Sri Ishpanishad,
Sri Ishopanishad.
yeah, where does that fit into all of this?
Honestly, I don't know which Veda it's part of.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, the Srila Prabhupada.
Would anybody know that? What Veda is the Sri Ishopanishad part of? I'm not sure. A little Google search, maybe we could figure that out. That, you see, and the Ishopanishad was a book that you've read? Yeah, okay. And so the followers of Srila Prabhupada, he translated the Bhagavad Gita. He translated the Srimad Bhagavatam. These are his major works. There's another text not of Vyasadeva, a text that's only 500 years old, the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. He translated this, and he gave some other important books. He only translated one Upanishad of the 108, and that was the Isha Upanishad. And something that I'll speak about as we go through this is that the Vedas, minus the Upanishads, are especially speaking on this karmic level. And the Upanishads especially speak on this jnanic level. And texts like the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam speak on this bhakti level. So as we're saying, in response to the earlier question, these teachings are speaking to people at different levels and encouraging them to take the next step. But there is a message of bhakti, the highest step, that is found in all of these texts. It's present always, but sometimes it's flowing there and it's more hidden or less emphasized. It's like if there's a river that's flowing underground, it's there, it's in our land, and then occasionally it comes up like it's a spring, and then it goes back underground, and then at some place it may open up as a huge lake, right? So this message of bhakti is there, and in that Isha Upanishad, there's a message of bhakti. There's a very important statement towards the end of that text that says, essentially it says that God is perceived by many as non-personal, without any attributes, but please remove that divine light that's preventing me from seeing your actual face. So I believe that Srila Prabhupada reached in particularly to that Upanishad because it has such important teachings in relation to bhakti. Okay, thank you. Yes. We did it. Thank you. So it's part of the.
Shukla Yajurveda.
I'm sorry.
Shukla Yajurveda.
Shukla.
Shukla Yajur.
The Shukla Yajurveda.
Samhita of the Yajurveda.
Okay.
They attached it to Samhita.
Okay. So in any case, part of the Yajurveda. Okay. So what is the message of the Upanishads? We're going to go into that in depth, but these are texts that are saying, think about this more carefully. Think about if this is really the way that you want to spend your days, trapped in a cycle of happiness and distress because you want the material things of this world. You have a much higher potential than that, right? You could begin to understand the true nature of the self, that you're not your body, that satisfying the senses of your body is not going to give you real happiness, that you're not even your mind, that you are the witness. You're the spark of spiritual energy that's eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. Stop searching for the outside things. Stop calling in the priest to light fires, to get the things of this world. Leave that behind. Take a step up and turn within. Find the happiness that lies within you. And you can do that by renouncing the things of this world, by walking away from these external things and turning within. That becomes the message of the Upanishads. Okay? And we're going to talk about this in more depth too, but right now we're just laying out the different categories. Questions? Upanishads? We're good? There's 108 of them, but really about 10 to 13 of them are like, they'll call them the more prominent ones, or Maha Upanishads. They're the ones that all the philosophers read and discuss and quote out of the 108. Okay. Then he composes another text called Vedanta Sutra, or it's also called Brahma Sutra. The Upanishads, there's 108 of them. They're full of incredible knowledge, but it's almost like they're not really organized in a clear progression. They're not presented the way that like you would maybe like if you had to do a PhD or something like that. You organize your thoughts and they unfold step by step, and then you lay out what is your main message, and then you conclude with that message again, and you build towards that message. They're kind of just more, this knowledge is just spread out all over. So maybe I should just read from my book now. Why don't I do that? Is that all right? I'm just doing all this work myself. I'll read to you starting with the Vedas. Okay, I'll read everything I got here. Why not, right? We'll go back over what I've just been discussing. The Veda, the original manual for living in the universe. Actually, I won't read all this because I've kind of just said it already. The four Vedas, pathways to prosperity, blessings, and harmony. Vyasadeva's task began with dividing the expansive body of the Veda into four distinct works: the Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. Together, the four Vedas comprise over 20,000 verses or mantras. Each work has four subdivisions: the Samhitas, collections of hymns and mantras; the Aranyakas, covering rituals, ceremonies, and sacrifices; the Brahmanas, interpretations of ritual; and then Upanishads, philosophical and mystical narratives and dialogues. Now collectively referred to as the four Vedas, or simply the Vedas, this body of texts shape the ritual life of the tradition. Their hymns honor a pantheon of gods and goddesses, many of whom personify aspects of nature and are seen as the superintendents of those natural gifts. For instance, Surya, god of the sun; Soma, god of the moon; Agni, god of fire; Ushas, goddess of the dawn; Indra, god of the rain; and Vayu, god of the wind. Others represented more abstract qualities, such as knowledge, the goddess Saraswati; preservation, the god Vishnu; good fortune, the goddess Lakshmi; friendship, the god Mitra; and speech, the goddess Vach. Through sacrificial rites, the Vedas teach humanity to show gratitude for the gifts of nature, repay its debts to the gods, and seek their continued favor. Within the Vedic vision, this natural reciprocal relationship of sacrifice and blessings brings order to an otherwise chaotic universe driven by selfishness. Duties and ethics are outlined in the Vedas according to an individual's aptitude and stage of life. Rites of passage for birth, coming of age, marriage, and death develop out of the Vedas in order to nurture the character and disposition most conducive for maintaining family and society. Does this all make sense? Kind of clear, right? You read these texts and it's showing it's a manual for how to live, right? Know that everything that you get, the sun, the rain, etc., they're all being provided for you. A civilized, evolving person will show some gratitude for that. And through that, they'll receive still more blessings. They'll be encouraged to think that way and respond that way by receiving more. A life guided by the Vedic instructions cultivated good karma. Through virtuous actions, one was blessed with material benefits: rain for crops, wealth, a happy marriage, healthy children, and other forms of prosperity. Good karma also led to more fortunate circumstances in the next life, culminated in the highest material goal, birth in the upper planets of the universe, where the residents enjoy long lifespans and pleasures that eclipse all earthly experiences. The Vedas would be the domain of the Brahmanas, priests who were trained in the details of their rituals and the precise pronunciation and intonation of their Sanskrit verses, ensuring the full and proper expression of the mantra's potency. Did everybody get that last part? Who's reading these books? The average person? Not at all. It's the priests that are reading these manuals, right? And they're giving instruction to people how to live, right? You would have these brahmanas. Some of them are really into doing the rituals. Some of them are more into instructing how to live better. And through their teachings and through their rituals, one can live this healthy, prosperous life where you're less, before you come to this level, which is called karma, action, how to live in harmony with the law of karma and receive good reactions in this world. Everyone would just be selfishly acting, crudely, not recognizing that these are all gifts, not recognizing the need to appreciate it, not recognizing the need to operate harmoniously with others. So the priests were there to help one become a more civilized human being through their teachings and through their rituals. Okay, it's a step up. Clear? Think of this if you go into temples, commonly people are going there to get a ritual done for their family, right? They want, maybe it's a birthday, or they want some special blessing for their child, or oh, the wife is pregnant now, let's go, and the priest will chant some mantras. You see this little fire pit that they have here, and you can see these kind of rituals going on all the time. Okay, but what happens if is there something more? Well, that's where the Upanishads come in. I'll read this now. The Upanishads, turning inward to discover the self. Upanishad literally means sitting near. The designation refers to the philosophical dialogues between spiritual teachers and their disciples, who would traditionally sit at their feet to attentively receive instruction. There are 108 Upanishads, out of which 10 or so are considered most important or principal. Strictly speaking, the Upanishads are a subcategory of the four Vedas. They're called Vedanta, and now this is real important because this is such an important word and concept, Vedanta. They're called Vedanta since each of these Vedas ends, anta, with a collection of Upanishads. So they're the end of the Vedas, Vedanta. Yet their message and mood are altogether different, and therefore they are regarded as a distinct category of sacred text in contrast to the rest of the Vedas. The preceding Vedic lessons directed followers to look outward in the form of rituals of sacrifice for well-being within the material world. The Upanishads guide one to look inward. External ritual, and think about this, this is key. External ritual is replaced by the internal practice of introspection, informed by Atma-jnana, knowledge of the self. Atma-jnana is established as life's most essential concern, right? So when I was thinking that a healthy, prosperous family life was life's most important concern, the earlier Vedic subdivisions were very important, and the rituals, external rituals, were very important. This is what life is all about, doing these rituals together and having a harmonious family life and community life. And the Upanishads say, take that external ritual, leave it behind, do an internal sacrifice, right? Burn that all up in the fire of jnana, of knowledge, right? And find out who you really are, right? You think I am this husband of this family and this home. You're none of those things. You're just passing through that in a speck of time. You are eternal. Find that eternal self. Meditate on that and walk away from this world, which seems like a beautiful, pleasant world, but doesn't it always turn a little darker, right? You know, you're in that home right now. So many things can happen. Invaders can come and take your home. The people that you love in the home may die. You know, the home may become too expensive and you have to leave it. And then the attachment that you have to it will just cause you suffering. You know, this is where the Upanishads are going to come and give this stoic understanding about life, and that there's something higher and more important and more dependable and more real, and that is your own nature within. So they're going to speak on that level. Discernment between the permanent and the impermanent is central to the Upanishads. Names and forms are deemed illusory. The senses must be brought under control by the self, brought under control of the self by meditation on the true self, beyond name and form. One must also learn to behold the Atma in all living beings. Through constant reflection and meditation, one can realize and experience the ultimate truth of their eternal spiritual nature, breaking the shackles of illusion, transcending the sufferings of this world, and shining in their own spiritual glory. The Upanishads are especially relevant. Who was reading and studying the Vedas, the earlier parts of the Vedas? The priests, right? The Brahmanas, the priests. Who's studying these books? It's a little different. It's not the priests. It's not the ritual performers. The Upanishads are especially relevant for the Jnana Yogi, the sannyasi, who renounces society and retreats to the forest to cultivate deeper spiritual experience, seeking moksha, release from the cycle of repeated birth and death. So you see the difference? You see the distinction between the two, the earlier Vedic divisions and the Upanishads, which speak in a very different way. All right. Now on to the next important literature, that Vyasadeva compiles, and that's the Vedanta Sutra. It's one book. I think it's 555 sutras, compressed little aphorisms that hold. It's like taking a lot of knowledge and compressing it into one short statement. And as I mentioned earlier, the typical Vedic lifestyle was, as a youngster, you go to the home of your guru, and you chant these mantras, you chant these sutras, right? 555 sutras. It sounds like a lot to memorize. But actually, if you're young and you're doing that, you get it in no time. And then each one of the sutras it's so condensed and so cryptic that it's not easy to understand exactly what it means. But once you've memorized it all, it's like all those sutras are kind of like files within your computer, or like folders within your computer, each one with its title. And then the guru fills in those folders with files of teaching so that you can understand the meaning of them all. So the Vedanta Sutra is a way, and here I am, I could just read it. The Vedanta Sutras, the compact essence of Vedic wisdom. In his composition called the Vedanta Sutra, or Brahma Sutras, Vyasadeva presented the essence of the principal Upanishads in a succinct form of 555 aphorisms or sutras. His purpose was twofold. First, to arrange the dispersed ideas into a synthetic logical order, and second, to create a framework that could be memorized with ease. So again, the Upanishads teachings are wonderful, but they're a bit all over the place. They're not presented in a systematic form. The Vedanta Sutra just breaks it down, and drawing from them, it just goes through a progression of thought so that you can make clear sense of their message. And at the same time, it presents them in the sutra format so that you can memorize it all. The word sutra literally means thread, reflecting its function of stringing together the teachings of the Upanishads. Like a speaker using bullet points to outline a talk, the sutras condense knowledge into compact statements, making them easier to memorize systematically. By daily chanting, the student could commit them to memory, threading together the key teachings of Vedanta and recalling them at will. Cryptic by nature, the sutras cannot truly be understood without the clear commentary of a learned teacher. Memorizing them is like having a series of folders on a computer, each labeled with the subject. The teacher gradually provides the documents, the meanings of each sutra, to fill those folders. The Vedanta Sutras are recognized as one of three foundational texts of the Vedanta tradition, alongside the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. Together, these three serve as the primary sources of authority for followers of Vedanta. We'll talk about that more. Widely accepted as the definitive exposition of the truths taught in the Upanishads and commanding great respect. Over the centuries, prominent teachers have written distinctive commentaries on the sutras to establish their own doctrines, giving rise to the diverse and often conflicting lineages of Vedanta, preserved through unbroken chains of teachers and students. Okay, maybe that was a lot to throw out there right there, but I'll just summarize it and try to make it a little bit simpler. So now we get to the spiritual teachings, the Upanishads. And they have so much to say, but they're kind of all over the place. And so Vyasa says, let me provide a study guide, in a sense, to the Upanishads. It's going to summarize all the teachings and lay it out in a systematic fashion. He provides the Vedanta Sutras, but they're cryptic. They're hard to understand, right? And so they require a teacher to explain them. But what I wrote about there at the end, and it's something that we're going to fill out when we get into the next category of literature, which is going to include the Bhagavad Gita, that there's a school of philosophy that is extremely influential. Pretty much everything that we see in Hinduism kind of grows out of it. All the teachings about spirituality and becoming free are drawn out of this tradition of Vedanta. And the way that it's presented is that there's 3 texts. There's the Upanishads themselves, which is 108 books. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, 10 to 13 of them are considered the prominent, most important Upanishads, the most studied. So let's say really you got about 13 books there, because none of these great acharyas have written commentaries on all of them, but these really important ones they've written commentaries on. And then there's the Vedanta Sutra, which is the summary of that. And then there's one more text that we're going to talk about tomorrow that's so important, the Bhagavad Gita, which is 700 verses. Together, we could say you read these 3 books, you study these 3 books, you comment on these 3 books to understand what is called Vedanta. Now, Vedanta, what it means to be a Vedantin or a follower of Vedanta is that to understand truth, you've accepted that there is a way to understand truth. It's a particular epistemology. How do we understand what is true? Where do we find truth? How do we measure? What do we measure truth against? Or what do we measure any idea of knowledge against to determine whether it is true? We see if it's consistent with Vedanta. If it's consistent with the Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita, then we accept it as truth. That's our standard. Just like in a courtroom where like there's 2 lawyers that are arguing a different point, and they have their different points of view, but there's a basis upon which they're arguing, right? It's not exactly logic, right? The basis is what? What's the foundation that their statements are being measured against? The law, right? The law books. That there are these books of law that the judge accepts, that each lawyer accepts. They know that they have to prove their point based on the law. And the judge's responsibility is to make sure that they're keeping it on that point and making sure that the jury understands this as well, right? They may say that this may be a horrible person and they may have done a lot of horrible things, but what you have to decide is if they've broken this law, right? And that and only that, right? So they got to keep it on that. The law books in Vedanta are these 3 bodies of literature. And the thing is that people interpret them in different ways. So I may be Vedantin and you may be a Vedantin, and we may disagree on something, and then we may debate. And what is our debate based on? Who's better representing these texts? Because we all accept that these texts are apurusheya, that they're not even man-made, that they're an eternal body of knowledge. They're dependable. So the question is, who's interpreting these books well? And their traditions or lineages called sampradayas, where a great teacher interprets those texts, generally responds to the previous interpretations of them, showing where they're flawed, in their opinion, in providing this new, nuanced way of looking at Vedanta. And then they hand it down from guru to disciple, and these lineages go down over the centuries. Like that, they're handed down. These different lineages of Vedanta. So I wish we had time. Or will you be here tomorrow? Come tomorrow and keep your question, because I'm 1 minute over time, and it's my duty to end now. But please, if you're finding this interesting, we're going to go deeper and deeper into it in the coming days. And so please come if you can. If you'd like to get hear more of these lectures, please speak to Gabriella, who will be outside. Please also stick around for the Kirtan, and we'll see. Oh, and at 11:15, I believe, 11:30, Yogi True will be doing a workshop on meditation, not to be missed. It's really worth checking out. Thank you all so much. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Hari Om.